Watch right now on the Front News Project. Dozens of drones in the sky over Poland. NATO is preparing retaliatory strikes on the center of Kyiv. The cabinet of ministers has been damaged. A secret military base for launching Oreshnik in Belarus and Iranian military personnel are already in Minsk. And of course, the brilliant special operation by the Ukrainian GUR. Enemy ships are burning near Novorossiysk, and this is just the beginning. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. Greetings. This is Vladimir Timoshenko with you, and we're starting right away with the main topic of the week. A swarm of Russian drones in the sky over Poland. Several dozen combat UAVs violated the airspace of a NATO country just for a moment, which led to destruction. How did NATO respond, or how will it respond, and will there be a major war between Russia and the alliance? Let's watch.
Oh my God.
This is the beginning of World War III. NATO countries have never seen an attack like this before, or is it just a typical provocation? NATO's reactions to Russian drones entering Polish territory on the night of September 10th vary greatly, but the fact remains. For the first time, the Russian Federation openly attacked a country of the North Atlantic Alliance with strike drones. According to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, a total of 19 Shahed-type drones entered their territory. Preliminarily, only 4 of them were shot down. The rest were likely suppressed by Russian electronic warfare systems. At the same time, it is known that one of the drones managed to fly about 300 kilometers across Poland. However, the official report states that all targets were destroyed. And this was achieved through the efforts of almost the entire eastern NATO air flank, including even an airborne radar reconnaissance aircraft.
The Polish side claims that they shot down everything, and at the same time, even fuel tankers were deployed, for example from the base in Itare, to refuel the fighters in Polish airspace that were involved in repelling the drone attack.
At the same time, the raid did not go unnoticed by civilians. The remains of the downed drone destroyed a residential building. There were also reports of UAVs falling right in the middle of the street. In addition to all this, thousands of people were unable to depart from Polish airports.
Operations at 4 airports were suspended, meaning the main hub in Warsaw, the Nishopen Airport, as well as Warsaw Modlin were affected, Rzeszów-Jasionka, which is the airport closest to Ukraine, and Lublin.
But even more shocking than the very fact of the attack on NATO is the reaction that followed from both the alliance members and Poland itself. Thus, in the country that essentially became the target of an attack by 24 strike drones, this raid was called a provocation, citing the absence of casualties.
Most likely, we are dealing with a large-scale provocation, but at the same time, we are consulting with our allies, and I am in constant contact with the NATO Secretary General. This is the first time that Russian drones have been shot down over the territory of a NATO country, and therefore all our allies are taking this situation very seriously. We have not recorded any casualties, of course. The search for the downed drones is ongoing.
NATO leadership has also expressed deep concern. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated, "The North Atlantic Alliance will defend every inch of its territory." However, a full assessment of the incident is still ongoing. In the US, where consultations began immediately after the drones crossed the border, they have so far decided to remain completely silent in public.
Mr. President, what regarding the recent Russian drones that entered Polish territory?
Belarus, on the other hand, did not remain silent. Even though most of the drones that entered Poland came from there, the local Minister of Defense with a straight face declared that if it weren't for them, Warsaw wouldn't have had time to react at all. So you should actually be grateful that we warned you.
Through the available channels of communication, from 11 p.m. on September 9th to 4 a.m. on September 10th, our on-duty forces and resources exchanged information about the aerial radar situation with the on-duty forces and resources of Poland and the Republic of Lithuania, thereby notifying them about the approach of unidentified flying objects to their country's territories. This allowed the Polish side to respond promptly to the actions of the drones by scrambling their on-duty forces.
However, the main question arises, what was this all about? According to analysts, with such an attack, the Russian Federation was trying to achieve several objectives at once. First, to show Europe what war really is, and that it is much closer than they think. Second, to test how NATO would respond to a possible incursion, particularly in the Suwałki corridor area.
Accordingly, in this particular case, it was a careful measurement of the potential response and an assessment from a military standpoint of how the adversaries operate. All the more so since the Zapad 2025 exercises are starting in Belarus, and especially since there are Russian troops there, and the Russian Federation, among other things, has, so to speak, access to data on Belarusian capabilities.
Also, a drone attack on Poland should prompt Europe not to be so eager to defend Ukraine's interests in the upcoming negotiations. After all, it is the Europeans today who are opposing the idea of the US and Russia imposing the notion of unconditional concessions on official Kyiv. Moreover, analysts believe that if the plan doesn't work, it could be repeated.
It's not for nothing, in fact, that a series of exercises is taking place on the territory of the Republic of Belarus. Undoubtedly, all these preparations, all these military maneuvers are primarily aimed at practicing certain actions that in the future will be directed either against the Baltic countries or against the Accord. Therefore, without a doubt, there is indeed a new round of escalation taking place.
It seems that NATO also understands the growing risks, which is why, alongside rather lackluster rhetoric, they have nevertheless decided to urgently mobilize Polish reservists and strengthen the air defense in the eastern part of the country.
The European Union has announced it allocated extra funds for Poland to buy ground-based air defense systems to counter drones, as well as artillery, electronic warfare equipment, and more.
Music. If the aggressor is not pacified, the escalation will continue to grow. Therefore, it is necessary to increase the pressure on Moscow. President Zelensky also promised that if necessary, Ukraine would help Poland organize a public alert system and share effective methods for countering Russian drones and missiles.
Ukraine, Poland. It seems this is only the beginning. The Kremlin is already, in fact, openly preparing for war with Finland. A certain head of the Russian Federation's Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, declares that Finland, quote, is becoming a hotbed of fascism even faster than Ukraine. Meanwhile, the State Duma warns that Helsinki's irresponsible policies could lead to a conflict with Russia. And supposedly, the Finnish authorities will have to bear the responsibility for that. We've heard something like this before somewhere. Details in the report.
New threats and accusations. The Russian dictator is preparing for yet another war.
Russia has always achieved results and has always emerged victorious from even the most difficult trials.
Well, not always, to be precise, but let's not recall the achievements of the great Russian army right now. In the past few days, Putin's lackeys have been making statements about a possible war. The former ALCO president, Dmitry Medvedev, has decided that Finland is preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia. It seems they are preparing a springboard for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly has a legal right to reparations from Finland for World War II. He claims that at the time they paid too little thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
Just more nonsense from the Kremlin drunkard Medvedev, who likes to rewrite history, just as Russia does in general. If we talk specifically about any reparations, there were repeated consultations between Soviet Russia and Finland after World War II, during which the term Finlandization actually emerged. In this context, the Soviet Union did not demand any territorial concessions or reparations from Finland, and in return received a promise that Finland would not join NATO. But obviously the situation has changed over time.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. According to him, Helsinki's actions are allegedly extremely irresponsible, and the country's leadership is turning Finland into a hotbed of fascism.
Finland is pursuing a truly irresponsible political leadership. I am truly very sorry for all of these people who have been through so much hardship and adversity and who absolutely do not deserve the outcome and the difficult circumstances that we are in now.
Kartapolov also stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything they need. Medvedev had previously said the same thing.
We cannot ignore the important fact that Finland is now a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This inevitably leads to changes in our military approaches to border arrangements, as well as to countering any possible unfriendly acts.
If we recall the well-known phrase often attributed to Churchill, that the fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists, then Russians are vividly highlighting the current ideology of the state owl, running around accusing everyone left and right of allegedly supporting Nazi or fascist ideas. Of course, there are no concrete facts behind these accusations, but this kind of hybrid psychological aggression against Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states is yet another confirmation of the Russian Federation's long-term plans. They have no intention of stopping at Ukraine, and much of Putin's plan is about restoring the Soviet Union's influence over Eastern and Northeastern Europe.
These statements show that Moscow is sharply escalating its aggressive rhetoric against Finland, the new NATO country, and all accusations directed at it are a continuation of the Kremlin's well-known tactic of attributing aggressive intentions to its neighbors, thereby justifying its own militarization.
If the Finns do not respond proactively to various kinds of provocations, if the Finns let the Russians get away with hybrid attacks and information psychological operations, or possibly in the future, Finland may face cases similar to what we are seeing today with Poland, namely the incursion of a large number of drones, which can only be described as a deliberate plan, then the Russians will try to carry out concrete physical operations on the ground in order to seize Finnish territory.
Russia has long been building up its strength along the Finnish border, erecting new tents and shelters for fighter jets from storage. In this way, the Kremlin is gradually preparing the ground to put pressure on Finland.
Well then, now for an analysis of the operational situation on the blazing Pokrovsk front, where the enemy continues its campaign of military terror. On the Pokrovsk front, Russian forces attempted to advance 28 times on the positions of our troops in the areas of the settlements of Nikanorivka, Mayak, Novoekonomichna, Rodinska, Mirolubivka, Lisivka, Zverova, Kotlina, Udachna, Muravka, Dakhna, Filia, and towards the settlement of Pokrovsk. Our defenders have already repelled 24 attacks, and the fighting continues. 25 dead and 18 wounded Arikats. These are the consequences of the horrific Russian airstrike on the village of Yarova in the Donetsk region. Kremlin terrorists struck with aerial bombs precisely at the moment when people were receiving their pensions. The 5 most seriously wounded were taken to Dnipro. TSN journalist Olha Pavlovska found out what condition they are in and whether there is any chance of saving them.
Tatiana has just been brought from the operating room to intensive care. She has multiple injuries all over her body, but the most dangerous fragment which pierced her neck has just been removed by the doctors.
The surgery, the vertebral artery is very important for our body. It supplies blood to the posterior parts of the brain and vital organs.
68-year-old Polina asked not to show her face. She had already left Yarova in the summer to get away from the front line, but returned to collect her pension and was caught in the attack.
I came for my pension. It hadn't been transferred to my card yet, so I thought I'd just withdraw it since it had already arrived here. I had just come to collect the money and there were already dead bodies lying around.
These are the consequences of the strike. There were a lot of people here, a lot of blood, and a lot of pieces of clothing.
These are the first minutes after the strike. Dozens dead, dozens wounded, almost all of them elderly people who were standing in line for their pensions. The most severe case is 71-year-old Vasily, who was brought to Dnipro in a coma.
His condition is extremely serious, even critical. He lost parts of his intestines, has no navel, it was torn out, and his legs are badly wounded.
She was just watering flowers in the square, says Elena, a municipal worker. While working, she saw people gathering to collect their pensions. She regained consciousness, already covered in blood and with fractures after the powerful explosion.
The blast wave threw me aside. I flew under a bench. I thought I was torn apart completely. There was panic. Everyone was running. People were screaming. Someone had their leg torn off. It was all so terrifying.
like that. Doctors are already preparing for a series of complex surgeries. They hope to successfully remove the fragment that pierced Valentina's spine in her lower back.
If we can remove this fragment and if the wound heals without inflammation, I think she has every chance
to finally walk again once more.
Meanwhile, doctors are trying to save a patient's arm.
The fragment entered the middle third of the upper arm, traveled along the bone, broke the bone, and stayed there. There is always a chance, but unfortunately, the older the patient, the fewer chances there are. It's a feature of physiology, and the bones are very fragile.
The condition of all 5 of these wounded remains serious, while the other 13 victims from the village of Yarovaya are currently receiving assistance in the Donetsk region.
And now let's move to the Novopavlovka sector of the front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. In the Novopavlovka direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 9 enemy attacks near the settlements of Ivanivka, Filia, Zeleny High, Tolstoy, Malivka, Komishuvaka, Olhivska, Poltavka, and towards Novoivanivka. Another 5 enemy attacks are still ongoing. The largest air attack by Russia on Ukraine since the beginning of the war, during which the cabinet of ministers was struck, is a sign that the self-confidence of the Russian dictator Putin is growing. The Kremlin has even stopped pretending to be interested in a peace agreement. This is exactly what the Western press is reporting. And by the way, foreign diplomats were shown the aftermath of the Russian attack on the cabinet building. A film crew from our colleagues at the television news service also visited the site of the strike. Here is their exclusive report for your attention.
Journalists in bright lime green helmets are being led through the dimly lit government corridors. In the right wing of the government building, on the upper floors are the offices of the Ministers of Finance and Economy. Now they are without electricity, the corridors are flooded with water, and there is a sharp stench of burning. This is the 9th and 10th floors of the government building, or rather, what is left of them. A Russian missile landed here from Kanda, and by some miracle, the warhead did not detonate. If the munition had exploded, most of the government building would have been reduced to ruins. At the site where the fire was extinguished, explosive ordnance experts are still finding remnants of the Russian missile. These are material evidence of yet another crime committed by the Russians. At the moment, rescuers continue to clear the debris and reinforce the damaged structural elements.
There are still many unstable structures. All of this needs to be dismantled and safe conditions created so that civilian builders and repair workers can enter, inspect, and then decide what to do next.
On September 7th at 6 a.m., during a massive air attack, a ballistic missile struck the cabinet building. The fuel tank with rocket fuel exploded and a major fire broke out. The blast wave and fire partially destroyed the facade, roof, floor, interfloor slabs, and partitions. Several dozen offices were left without windows and doors. For 2 hours, rescuers tried to bring the fire under control.
The extinguishing
of the fire was complicated by the fact that there were a lot of wooden structures in the building's elements. The flames spread very quickly. There was a high fire load from the very beginning. This was already the 7th location in Kyiv, meaning the state emergency service units were already working at 6 other sites, so the reinforcement of resources was carried out in stages.
Of resources.
2 floors below the impact epicenter are halls for government meetings of the cabinet of the Prime Minister. They were partially damaged. On the same day, Yulia Sviridenko published photos of the destroyed premises and assured that Russian terror would not stop the work of the government. The consequences of the Russian missile strike were seen firsthand by the heads of diplomatic missions accredited in Ukraine. They were shown not only the destruction, which serves as direct evidence of Russia's unwillingness to move toward peace, and the Ukrainian Prime Minister stated that this is an open mockery by the aggressor of the diplomatic efforts of the civilized world.
And right now, here is an analysis of the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. The Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. On the Kramatorsk front, our defenders repelled 1 attack by the occupiers. The enemy carried out offensive actions, trying to advance in the area of Stepokki. The defense forces also stopped an enemy attack on the Toretsk front. The invader tried to advance in the area of the settlement of Poltavka. A brilliant attack by the armed forces of Ukraine in the enemy's lair. Special forces of the Main Intelligence Directorate struck an Occupiers ship near Novorossiysk. As a result, this very ship has been put out of commission. Soon we will show you this footage. Moreover, European countries are closing their airspace one after another along the borders with Russia and Belarus. After Poland, Latvia has also taken this step. Warsaw, by the way, is completely closing its border with Belarus. Lukashenko, however, is not calming down. In Belarus, he is building a secret military base the size of 280 football fields. It is from there that Minsk will be ready to launch Putin's Oreshnik. Here are the details. A precise strike, and the occupiers were blown away. The Main Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine destroyed a Russian Black Sea Fleet ship near Novorossiysk. Ukrainian forces struck a ship that the Russians put into service in 2015. Its value is about $60 million. There are only 4 such vessels in Russia. Now there are 3 left. Additionally, agents of the AT movement fired at an air defense plant in Tula and destroyed a communications tower. Meanwhile, in Belarus, they are building a secret military base. Construction work in the south of the country is now in full swing. The construction area is roughly equivalent to 280 football fields. Russian media report that a Russian Oreshnik missile complex may be deployed here.
The emergence of this information can be seen as part of information and psychological operations. What has been confirmed is that, indeed, on the territory of the Republic of Belarus, a military base near Rasipovichi, where the 465th Missile Brigade is stationed, has been modernized. It should be noted that 3 new hangars have indeed been built there, housing Iskander-M complexes.
And while Lukashenko secretly carries out Putin's orders, Poland is completely closing its borders with Belarus from the night of September 11th to 12th, including railway crossings. The country has officially taken this step because of the Russian-Belarusian military exercises that begin on Friday. But in reality, of course, the real reason is those very drones that were flying toward Poland, including from Belarusian territory.
According to intelligence, these military exercises will involve the implementation of the so-called Suwałki corridor, meaning an incursion from the territory of the Republic of Belarus with the aim of creating a land corridor that would connect the Republic of Belarus with the Russian enclave in the Kaliningrad region. Therefore, such a preventive measure by the Polish side is a response to possible provocations from the Russian Federation.
And yes, Poland continues to count Kremlin drones. Let us recall that about 15 Russian UAV wrecks have been found on the country's territory. One of the drones crashed on the territory of a military base, and Putin's Garand drones are equipped with additional fuel tanks, which allowed these UAVs to cover a distance of more than 700 kilometers. And here's what's important to note. The drones that entered Poland weren't just flying anywhere, but were heading toward the NATO base in Rzeszów. It's interesting, after this, will the alliance continue to just express concern for much longer?
Regarding the extra fuel tanks, I wouldn't rule out that this is actually an element of a planned provocation by the Russian side. The technical specifications of the Geran indicate a range of up to 450 kilometers. The main version currently being promoted by the Russian side is that the Gerans were suppressed by Ukraine's electronic warfare air defense systems, which caused them to change course, and as a result, after deviating, they violated Polish airspace. Let me emphasize again, most of the Gerans were launched directly from the territory of the Republic of Belarus.
In turn, the German Chancellor stated that this drone incident demonstrated the need for a significant reform of the alliance's air defense in Europe.
At the moment of countering the UAVs, F-35s were scrambled and accordingly used missiles to destroy the Gerans, which cost about $10,000 each, while the missiles themselves cost around $1.5 million. This accordingly indicates the unpreparedness of the NATO bloc to repel large-scale attacks, whether from the Russian Federation or from the territory of the Belarusian Republic, using aerodynamic means of destruction.
Russia uses Crimea for military logistics. Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it has moved troops to the southern front, Kherson and Zaporizhia, via the Kerch Bridge.
The Russian Federation fully understands the key importance of Crimea. This accordingly is the infrastructure of military bases and also accordingly serves as a springboard for further pressure on mainland Ukraine. That is why the main objective of the Russian Federation is to hold on to the peninsula by military means.
And to fight the occupiers, the United Kingdom and Ukraine are launching local production of interceptor drones, which will be effective in destroying Russian Shaheds and other strike UAVs. And now, let's move to the Kupiansk and Lyman directions of the front. Yes, these are sacred goals for Putin and all his cronies. Accordingly, the situation here is also stretched to the limit. There are currently 2 ongoing combat engagements in the Kupiansk direction. Since the beginning of the day, the enemy has advanced 4 times on the positions of our defenders in the areas of Kupiansk, Petropavlivka, Nova Krylyakivka, and towards Kurilivka. In the Lyman direction, there have been 10 combat engagements today, 4 of which are still ongoing. The enemy attacked in the areas of the settlements of Shandry Holov and Drobyshev. Their work is impressive. Robots in service with the Ukrainian armed forces. They help save the lives of Ukrainian defenders by accessing places where people cannot go. Caring for the lives and health of their personnel, the leadership of the Ukrainian army is increasingly deploying ground-based drones at the front. The Russian occupiers can only dream of such things. After all, no one cares about their lives. Let's take a closer look at this topic.
Combat, logistics, evacuation, engineering, reconnaissance. This is not a complete list of the types of ground robotic systems, or GRS. In the 4th year of the war, it's hard to imagine how Ukraine could successfully resist Russia without these machines. Previously, GRS were ineffective, but now they are truly saving the lives of Ukrainian soldiers.
You can fight for a long time, you can fight in different ways, but unfortunately life is very fragile and incredibly valuable. And in order not to pay a high price for the war against the enemy, we try to use drones. It's cheaper than fighting with people.
The main goal of using GRS is to preserve human life. Right now, moving infantry on the front line in the gray zone is almost 100% suicide, because this is the territory of FPV drones, which can wait for a target for days in sleep mode. GRS are excellent at delivering ammunition and supplies.
Tasks are carried out logistically with vacuum operations, that is, delivering provisions. We work at the supply position, evacuate the wounded. With the help of these robots, we save the lives of servicemen. Even if there's a mine explosion, we only lose metal, not a person. They perform extremely well on the job, 100%.
One example of a logistics GRS, the Rise, can carry up to 200 kilograms of cargo, for instance, evacuate 2 wounded soldiers. It operates at a range of 20 kilometers, meaning it can pick up or deliver cargo 10 kilometers away and return to the operator. This ground drone is capable of incredible feats. It works in tandem with an aerial drone, which serves as the Rise's eyes.
It hit a mine and lost 3 wheels. On a single wheel, it still delivered supplies to the position without any issues. In other words, it proved itself very well in this work.
Currently, 47% of all GRS missions are logistical and evacuation tasks. 25% are allocated to engineering tasks and demining, about 12% to combat missions, and the rest to special operations. Rise, Targan, Termit, this is far from a complete list of GRS used on the front lines. Currently, Ukraine has many specialists in this sector and is a world leader in GRS production, since these systems are immediately tested on the battlefield and all shortcomings are quickly addressed.
The speed and ingenuity of Ukrainian engineers are impressive. Many teams quickly adapt to the needs of the front line. Some solutions are still in the early stages, but others are already showing significant potential for integration into more complex architectures. Ukraine has already established itself as a key player in combat robotics. Nikita Makushin, head of Milrem Robotics.
In just the first quarter of 2025, the Defense Procurement Agency purchased more than 8,000 robots. In total, the state plans to order 15,000 UGVs this year, which is 15 times more than last year. Reducing personnel losses and accomplishing combat missions, these are tasks that Ukrainian UGVs handle excellently.
That's all for today, but very soon on the program Front News, there will be new unique reports from our journalists, straight from the hottest spots of the war, brought to you so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.